In my last video, I talked about the history of Europe in terms of genocide and colonialism, and one phrase recurred throughout my comment section: white guilt. Now, the reason that I brought up all of these different things is to discourage this idea that, white people have this grand history. Sure, people who were white did some great things and also some nasty things because they are human beings. But that is the more important point, that people are human beings and history is history. The people who assume that I have white guilt are assuming that I view history in terms of, okay, I'm white and this is white people history and this is other people history, which I don't make that distinction. The history of the Spanish and Christopher Columbus is no more my history than the history of the Arawak people who they murdered and enslaved. The real point is not white people did this or this group did that. The point is, this is what human beings are capable of, and more important is why they did it. A book that racists don't want you to read is something like Guns, Germs, Steel by Jared Diamond, or the documentary, I believe it was by National Geographic, on the same subject, which talked about why Europe gained the advantages it did and was able to, create colonization and commit the acts that it did. Europeans believed that they had more advanced culture because they had things like writing, although they didn't invent writing, and the reason that other people didn't have writing had little to do with how smart or how culturally advanced they were. Also, Christianity, it helps to believe that you have the one true God and the true faith on your side, and the rest of the world is a bunch of dirt-eating heathens when you go about conquering them. Once we understand why history played out as it did, why certain races had the advantages or the more advanced culture that they did, a lot of these issues of race dissolve. We see that often it comes down to things like geography rather than the inherent betterness of being white, which doesn't really amount to anything. I don't feel guilty for what I didn't do. Recognizing that I am treated differently by society simply because I am white is not the same as feeling guilty for what white people did. Again, I think this comes from a wrong-headed view of history in which we view white history versus non-white history, which is bunk. It's just that simple. But as a side note, I have to say that it's interesting in my time on YouTube and making videos, all the innumerable ways in which people can misread what I'm trying to say and the assumptions that they make based on how they perceive me, which in turn is largely has a dose of their own bias. So I mention something in light of trying to disparage white pride, and people assume that it's white guilt. Or I say X and people it assumes because it's Y, or people don't get sarcasm. Just another interesting thing to add to the catalog of miscommunication, I guess. That's all I have to say.